BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. First, I would like to give a big thank you to everyone who listened to the bonus episode on the Long Island serial killer, which came out over the weekend. There was some breaking news in that case. They finally released the 911 calls from Shannon Gilbert, who is a possible victim of the Long Island serial killer, and I did a direct response to that. And on Sunday, I also did a short promo for an upcoming series that is going to happen on BBOR about the case of Stephen Avery, made famous by the docu-series Making a Murderer. And big thank you once again to Jerome from the French Wrecking Crew for sharing a lot of things with me. And some more quick announcements before we begin this episode. First, I would like to remind you guys that in addition to the ways of supporting the channel that are listed in the intro, you can also support Black Box Online Radio at BuyMeACoffee.com, and the name of my page over there is BlackBoxNid88, but the link is in the description box, and if you'd like to make a contribution, all is welcome. It just goes directly back into supporting the show, things like buying books and equipment, BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88. But like many of these Zodiac Killer news reports, I often begin with an icebreaker question or a challenge question, and the one for this week comes to us from two different sources, and it is very simple. Do you enjoy coffee shop dates? Like going on a romantic date to a coffee shop. Some people think that it's very classic, other people think that it's a little bit boring. Which camp are you in? Or you can be somewhere in the middle. Imagine a Venn diagram in your mind, if you will. But I ask you this one because I'm a big fan of the show The Rational Male, which is hosted by Rollo Tomasi, and he said something that was rather both odd and some food for thought at the same time, and that is, do not ever go on a coffee shop date, because that shows that you can accept some type of boring or mundane outcome. You're showing that you're willing to do things that are not exciting, or that you are just very basic and you will not create any type of genuine energy with the person. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. But I wanted to ask this question because about 10 years ago, I stumbled upon a YouTube video from a woman who was maybe from Russia or a neighboring country in Eastern Europe, perhaps, just guessing, and she said something to the exact opposite side, and that was that if you're going to go on a first date with somebody, Some people think that, oh, let's do something exciting. Well, there are more ways that that could go wrong. And even some of the venues that you could choose to bring somebody, such as if you want to bring someone to a jazz club, maybe they absolutely hate the sound of a saxophone. I don't know how, I love the things, but maybe they don't. Or if you want to bring someone to a Vietnamese restaurant, maybe there are going to be loads of ingredients that they either don't like or they can't ingest because of some reason. So she said the answer is to the first date, bring your person where? To a coffee shop. Choose the place with the neutral atmosphere, and then use your personality and your own natural awesomeness, which you all have, to attract the person to you. So who do you agree with? The man or the woman in that? The man who says coffee shop dates are boring and you're showing that you're boring? Or do you think that it's good to bring someone to a neutral place and then try and attract them using your personality? If you would like to respond to the icebreaker, please write your answer in the comments section down below. And the final announcement is that I'm actually giving a shout out to Will Bloodworth, who sent this into the Facebook page, that he misses the audio downloads of this program for free at LaunchPad 1, so this episode will be available for download at just that, LaunchPad 1, Black Box Online Radio. There's a link to that in the description box. If you would like to download the audio as a pure podcast, you can do so, take it on the go anywhere and anyhow. If you would like to download the video version, you can use YouTube Premium, but that one you have to pay for. LaunchPad 1 is free, and I was uploading the audio as a pure podcast because some other listeners had requested it in the past. They like to take the show when they're out driving or jogging or walking anywhere outside of the land of Wi-Fi. But I had stopped doing it, and I decided if anyone made a request, then I would start uploading the show again to Launchpad 1, and request granted. So please look out for some free downloads of this program. And to some real Zodiac Killer news, as always, there is a podcast out there called Serial Killer Z to A. It is done by the Zodiac Killer channel, and season 1 of that program is talking entirely about the Zodiac Killer. So if you haven't heard that one yet, I would invite you to listen to it. It's going to cover some more of the basic general info, talking about the Zodiac Killer. The narrator on that one is awesome. The Zodiac Killer was a serial killer who operated in 1968 and 69. Whatever happened before or after that is anyone's guess. I am not someone who is a big believer in any of these pre-Zodiac crimes or non-canonical crimes. I have not been convinced of any of the victims, whether it's the murder of Ray Davis in 1962, or the Domingos Edwards in 63, the Swindle murders in 64, and so on. I'm just simply not convinced. If it turns out that they find the smoking gun some way, somehow, and it's revealed that all of these crimes are connected, I will say, okay, I was wrong. But until then, I really believe that the only crimes that were committed by the Zodiac Killer were the ones in 1968 and 69. And another question is, why were these people murdered? What was the point? And this was covered in the most recent episode of the Serial Killer Z to A show about, let's say hypothetically, if prime suspect Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac Killer. A motive that was heavily explored in the past was that we'll commit a series of crimes that seem to have no clear motive to confuse the authorities, and that is often referred to as the criminal masterpiece. Maybe even make it a criminal masterpiece loaded with mathematical signatures that no one would ever be able to figure out. But if we're going to talk about people who thought that the Zodiac crimes were a criminal masterpiece loaded with mathematical signatures, we should bring in another person to the discussion, and that is Gareth Penn. Robert Graysmith put out a book called Zodiac in 1986, and in 1987, Gareth Penn released Times 17, which more or less said that almost everything in the Zodiac Killer case was a mathematical signature. Things are loaded with Morse code and binary and radian angles. So many things are mathematical in the Zodiac world, in Gareth Penn's mind. And I did a 6-part book discussion on Times 17 in 2020, and I had to stop because I was planning on doing more like a 10 or maybe even 15-part book discussion on it, but I had to stop for a couple reasons. One is just being honest. There were other Zodiac Killer books that I wanted to read and share with you guys, but the more important reason was that you had to accept the initial premise that everything in the Zodiac case is a mathematical signature, that this person is this many footsteps away from this building, and then you can convert that into Morse code and then into binary. And or to give you an exact example, Gareth Penn believed that the Zodiac Killer murdered Sherry Jo Bates in 1966, and that if you were to play around with the mathematical values of the word Timex, because a Timex wristwatch was found nearby, or the watch band 7-inch watch band was found near the body of Sherry Jo Bates, and it had the word Timex, right? If you were to play around with the mathematical value of that word, you would get 617, which is the area code from the state of Massachusetts. And his suspect, Michael O'Hare, was someone who was heavily connected to both Massachusetts and California. Hence the title of Gareth Penn's book, Time 17, The Story of the Zodiac Killer in the State of Massachusetts and California, 1966 to 1981. And Gareth Penn is a researcher who went on to become a suspect himself. And one of the reasons for talking about him now is to give a shout out to Glenn Collins, who says, "Good morning, Ned. Can you please do a video on Gareth Penn as a Zodiac suspect, excuse me, please and thanks." Alright, so I think that Gareth Penn is absolutely more considerable as a suspect rather than a researcher, because he just wrote this book that is filled with these wild mathematical observations, and we have no idea of verifying them or not, and it's just so beyond belief. And I've said this once, but I'll say it again because I think it's important. Somebody once wrote into the channel saying that, alright, all this stuff about Morse code and binary and radians, Gareth Penn didn't even mean to take it all literally. He just wanted to draw attention to something that he thought was heavily neglected in the Zodiac Killer case, and that was mathematical signatures. And when we're talking about the radian discovery, that is that if you put an angle of 57.29 degrees on top of Mount Diablo, one arm of the radian goes to Blue Rock Springs Park, where Darlene Ferrin was murdered by the Zodiac Killer. One arm of the radian goes to Presidio Heights, where Paul Stine was murdered by the Zodiac Killer. And Mount Diablo is also equidistant to Lake Berryessa, as is Travis Air Force Base, and it's tying into the geographic locations. But Richard Grinnell of ZodiacCiphers.com was heavily critical of Gareth Penn, saying that he completely misunderstood what the Zodiac was trying to tell us. It's not about locating the kill sites. It was about the location of a bomb. The reason why you're supposed to use the bomb, or you're supposed to use radians to find the bomb, is because the bomb's location concerns radians and inches along the radians. I mean, maybe there's some type of hidden meaning there, but I confess that as a researcher, Gareth Penn is a little bit wacky. As a suspect, it's more considerable, because number one, he is providing explanations about all of these things and shows that he has an intense understanding of things like radian angles, things like Morse code and binary. And what I said during my book discussion in 2020 was, Gareth Penn is perhaps the best Zodiac Killer suspect. Do I think he was actually the Zodiac Killer? No. But I think he is the best suspect, because imagine the story. Somebody commits a series of homicides in 1968 and 69, or really 66 to 81, and then 15 years later, he writes a book telling you how it was all done. You dummies, it was in front of your face the whole time. You couldn't figure it out. I'm even gonna hide in plain sight once again and show you how I committed all these crimes, and you will never ever figure it out. I mean, that sounds like something that is larger than life and rather outrageous, but I think that there's some strikes against Gareth Penn as a Zodiac Killer suspect. Number one, I'm highly skeptical of his body type, because he may have had the brain for it, he may have had the knowledge for it, but body type? The book citing in on the Zodiac Killer by Drew Beeson lists Gareth Penn's height and weight from 1969 as 6 feet tall, 165 pounds. Now, how would you tie that into the footprints that were taken at Lake Berryessa or made at Lake Berryessa, and then they made casts of the footprints after the Lake Berryessa stabbing, and the forensic estimations that were made by Harold K. Snook were that this was from someone who weighed 200 to 220 pounds. I mean, he must have been wearing a pretty big backpack if he did indeed weigh 165 pounds, and then, like, what was he doing, walking on concrete blocks or something like that? I mean, crazier things have happened, but I think that he is perhaps a little bit too thin and slender to have been the Zodiac Killer, and furthermore, I think this highlights a much bigger problem in the Zodiac Killer mystery, and that is, just because somebody has learned something, or has made a discovery, or has made an observation, they don't have to go on to become a suspect. It doesn't mean that they are a Zodiac Killer, that they are the Zodiac Killer. Prime example, Donald Gene Hardin solved the 408 cipher. Really, it's him and his wife Betty, but Don Hardin solved the 408 cipher, and he goes on to become a Zodiac Killer suspect. Gareth Penn makes a couple observations about the Radiants. He goes on to become a Zodiac Killer suspect. Robert Graysmith writes a book called Zodiac and publishes it in 1986, as well as Zodiac Unmasked. He goes on to become a suspect for composing the ciphers in the Zodiac hoax theory. Just because somebody has some type of connection to the Zodiac Killer mystery, it doesn't mean that they also had a malicious role behind the scenes. But there is an additional component of Gareth Penn's theory as a researcher that I would also like to talk to you about today, and that is the 1981 part of his book Time 17, because Gareth Penn was also somebody who thought that the Zodiac Killer operated in the state of Massachusetts, and I said that there was a second reason for talking about this. This relates to the murder of Joan Webster, which occurred on or around November 28th of 1981. And what Gareth Penn thought was that, again, his suspect, Michael O'Hare, who was with Harvard University at the time, then went on to go to UC Berkeley, but he thought that Michael O'Hare was the Zodiac, and he came up with this connection involving automobiles. And I think that it's fascinating. I mean, I've been one of the few voices who has said that automobiles, cars, they are one of the only consistencies throughout the Zodiac Killer mystery. At the first crime at Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, Lake Berryessa, the Stein murder, that's one of the few commonalities among all of those crimes, is that some way, somehow, a car is involved. What Gareth Penn said was, the first Zodiac crime was at Lake Herman Road, where David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were shot outside of their car. At Blue Rock Springs, the victims were shot inside of their car. At Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac Killer stabbed the victims and then went back to Brian Hartnell's car and wrote a message on the car door. Then, at Presidio Heights, Paul Stein was murdered inside of his taxicab, but Paul Stein drove the Zodiac Killer to his death site, to the place where Paul Stein was murdered. I called it a death site. I mean, that's what it is, but that's just kind of a morbid way of looking at it. So then Gareth Penn added in this additional element of, with the murder of Joan Webster, the Zodiac could have approached her on November 28th and was now driving a car. He's now driving a victim to the kill site. And the reasons why is because, as I said, Joan Webster disappeared on November 28th of 1981. She was at Logan Airport in Boston, Massachusetts. She was a graduate student at Harvard studying architecture, and Michael O'Hare has a PhD in architecture, although the majority of his work seems to be lecturing about public policy. I mean, I shouldn't say that. He's done a lot with architecture, including the very famous artificial angle of 117 degrees. But Joan Webster is waiting in the taxi line after she has traveled back from Thanksgiving break, and some man approaches her, some man who has this really big beard, and he's wearing glasses. He is simply known as the Bearded Man. And he asks Joan Webster to get out of the taxi line, and she goes with him, and that's why Gareth Penn thought that, okay, this is the Zodiac killer, and he is now driving the car, and Joan Webster was missing for 9 years. Her remains were found in the spring of 1990 near Hamilton, Massachusetts, and she had died from blunt force trauma, although it's possible that some type of other abuse could have taken place. Maybe she could have been stabbed in some way. I mean, her remains had been in the ground for 9 years. A lot of evidence was probably lost, but she was definitely struck in the head with a very, very heavy blunt object. And if anyone would like to know more about the murder of Joan Webster and someone who is going to be challenging the Zodiac connection, there is a new book out that was just released a couple days ago by Eve Carson called Simple, Safe, and Secret, the 1981 Murder of Joan L. Webster, because there are three competing theories mostly. The first is that that Joan Webster was murdered by the Zodiac killer. The second is what the authorities put forward, that she was killed by the serial killer Leonard Paradiso, who was known as the Quahog, and he wasn't convicted of her murder, but they attributed her death to him. And the third is what Eve Carson is going to present, that there was a type of police cover-up, that there was a state trooper named Andrew Palumbo who may have actually delivered the fatal blow to Joan Webster. I mean, possibly. I think she entertains that as a possibility. But he was doing so on behalf of somebody else, that she was specifically targeted, and then the authorities used their power to cover up the situation and then blame Leonard Paradiso for the crime. Now, if you ask me, I think that all of these are questionable theories, but again, you can read more in the book Simple, Safe, and Secret, the 1981 Murder of Joan L. Webster by Eve Carson. This is available from Genius Books, and you can get it on geniusbooks.com or anywhere books are sold. Genius Books is also the place that gave us the wonderful Hunted, Profiled, and Exposed by Mark Hewitt, so lots of true crime material out there. And moving on to the next segment here, I have to begin with the famous story of Ted Cruz as the Zodiac Killer, and I've done a couple episodes about this story rather than a theory here on this channel. For a while I was doing the Zodiac Killer debunking series, and somebody had requested an episode on Ted Cruz, and that one is called Zodiac Ted Cruz. I don't think it's called Debunked, I think it's called WTF is the full title of it, Zodiac Ted Cruz WTF, because obviously Ted Cruz wasn't the Zodiac Killer, the senator from Texas. He was born 2 years after the first crime took place. Ted Cruz was born in 1970, and the only real value in having those types of discussions is that we can ask a question that was posed by Mel Magazine that said, are people looking to Ted Cruz as the Zodiac Killer because they don't want the case to be solved? They enjoy the excitement of the unsolved case, and also the excitement of how this one person committed a set of homicides, wrote letters taking credit for it, and was still never apprehended by the police. All the taunts, like the phone calls, the car door at Lake Berryessa, the ciphers. It's so much more than the letters, really. But they think that there is something that is mysterious in an entertaining way about a serial killer who could do that. I absolutely disagree with that type of thinking. I want this case solved, and I want to give that file the case closed stamp in the very near future. I sure hope so. But some people are perhaps in the world of the chase is more fun than the catch. What do you think? You can weigh in the comment section down below. And as I said, I have a debunking episode on Ted Cruz, and that was a request that somebody had made. And I think the same person also requested a debunking episode on Bernie Sanders. And I was like, Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont, former presidential candidate? Well, debunk Bernie? As what? Ted Cruz was the Zodiac Killer. Was Bernie Sanders D.B. Cooper, perhaps? But then I had this faded memory of, I said something maybe to the effect once on BBOR that Bernie Sanders was at least alive at the time. Bernie was born in the early 1940s. And as we're going to see throughout this episode, there is indeed a Bernie Sanders connection to the Zodiac Killer mystery. And I have to give a shout out to James Simpson, whom I've been corresponding with, and he has shared a lot of his observations about the Zodiac Killer CIA connection. And one of the final pieces that he shared with me is what I will begin with, and it comes to us from the political commentator Lauren Southern, who shared a solution to the Z13 cipher that says Bernie Sanders, also known as the My Name Is cipher. And to put that into context, the Zodiac mailed in the Z13 cipher with the introductory message, "This is the Zodiac speaking. By the way, have you cracked the last cipher I sent you? My name is blank." But I think that some of you guys are already very much on the game, and you can see that that is not the real Z13. That has definitely been altered. So I think either Lauren Southern or one of her friends, maybe someone from Rebel Media, had been playing around with the characters to try and force the solution of Bernie Sanders. But to get to some of the bigger observations that James Simpson has shared, and I promise you Bernie Sanders will come back into this, he has written something out for this show, and I want to be very clear. These are all his observations, not mine. He says, "Ned, thanks for the chance to share something with your show. I have prepared a statement about each of the cases that you are interested in below, the Zodiac Killer and the Amerithrax letters. They unfortunately may be very long for your time slot, so I accept that you might edit them down. I began work on the Zodiac ciphers in 2016 as a side project. Within a few searches through the internet databases, I noticed immediately that there were two distinct police sketches drawn of suspects in the case. I noticed then that there was a pretty big effort online and in media productions to convince everyone that it was a single person. Having these ciphers broken down one by one showed that without a doubt there was a team in operation and that they were backed by the CIA and the Department of Defense's Psychological Warfare Department, that they were engaged at the time throughout the country in known covert operations under a variety of code names. I looked to identify the team of operatives and set my attention to the ciphers themselves to form a recognizable pattern and the use of encryption techniques throughout each of them, as the ciphers were meant to direct the team and instruct them where to move and what type of affair to conduct. They were mailed into San Francisco as they moved throughout the country and eventually took their projects overseas to specific locations mentioned in the ciphers. This was orchestrated to keep the attention focused in that area for the rest of the country while it was being terrorized by their agents. There are many letters and cards that have been archived, and they have been compiled with my worksheets and are on my Facebook page. And if anyone would like to read the material on his Facebook page, it is called Zodiac Ciphers Solved, facebook.com/Zodiac Ciphers Solved. Each one leaves instructions and directions for the specific groups to use to stage operations throughout a time period lasting until the next group of operations, which was planned with the ciphers and cryptos, which leave no doubt that they were created in the same way as the Zodiac ciphers were compiled, and were specifically created to instruct two of the remaining operatives behind the original operations. I examined the Z408 cipher thoroughly and found that it had a few parts that were still unsolved, so I looked deeper into Don Hardin's research to see if there was anything that stood out as intentional, and looked to find the meaning from the misspellings, identifying the author using the Old English box cipher made from words that were incorrect. I then went on to form a conclusion about how the use of the last 18 letters of the Z408, as I found a sort of addendum that was used to clue you to identifying the star map, embedded with the quadrants of the Z340, mentioning a Baconian-era text, The Tempest. In it was a hidden star map that led the reader to a fabled location in the New World. When a star quadrant and the constellations of Hercules and Arcturus were found in the Z340 by connecting the dots in the ciphertext, it was coupled with the map to form a center point in Dublin, California. Now there's a whole lot of info in there, and before I go any further, I want to point out something that when James Simpson is talking about two Zodiac sketches, he is referring to the sketch after the Stein shooting on October 11th of 69. The other sketch that he is referring to is that of the Lake Berryessa voyeur that was seen on September 27th of 69 before the Lake Berryessa stabbing. That's when the three girls were sunbathing and they saw a man who seemed very well dressed, except His shirt was not tucked in, and they were surprised because he looked very neat. And he looked like such a neat person that they thought his hair might have actually been a wig, but he's just watching these three girls sunbathe for an extended period of time. And but I do need to emphasize that those are the two sketches he's talking about, and perhaps there isn't universal consensus that they are the same person. I mean, I am certainly not trying to convince anyone that they are the same person. But as far as the Stein shooting, you will see two different sketches. Like, even if you look at the wanted poster of the Zodiac killer, there are two different sketches there, and as I understand, that is the same person. One was the original sketch, and then one is the amended sketch. But that was not what James was referring to. He's referring to the Stein suspect and the Lake Berryessa voyeur. But I think that this is one of the few times when I've explored the Zodiac Killer CIA connection, and I found that it was going all the way back to 1966 with the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. And in that, at that time, Sherry Jo Bates, of course, was murdered on October 30th of that year. She was murdered outside of the Riverside City College library. And after the Bates murder, there were three sets of writings that were discovered. One of them was the Riverside Confession that says, Miss Bates was stupid, she went to the slaughter like a lamb, beware I'm stalking your girls now. That is the one that is typed. And then in December of 1966, there is the desktop poem that was discovered. I believe it's actually a custodian that found the desk in storage, and it's on the underside, and it says, sick of living, unwilling to die, blood spilled all over her dress, oh well it was red anyway. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the desktop poem. And then, in the spring of 1967, there are the three letters that are mailed that say Bates had to die, there will be more. One of them actually says she had to die, there will be more, because it was mailed to somebody who was also named Bates. It was mailed to Sherry Jo's father, actually, so that's why it says she had to die, there will be more. And the take on it from James Simpson is right here. It says, before the Sherry Jo Bates murder in Riverside, there was also a sort of cryptic discovery of a bayonet as a murder weapon. Operation Bayonet was the run-up to Operation Wrath of God, and are filed together as part of a series of operations which include Operation Spring of Youth. The Bates letters were also encrypted with a slight shift of the letters to derive the phrases Bate Shad to Pi, the RF frequency will be Morse. Bat is a female in Hebrew, and a Shad is a group or organization in Hebrew, and the word Pi standing for the 4-pi cult that formed by these members. These questions are better answered with graphics and to represent the letter shifts. And absolutely, I think that's true. And when he says 2 pi, the letters say Bates had to die, and then there is a letter D that has a line that's going down, and that's actually meant to be the word pi. Bate Shad. Well, I mean, you guys can respond in the comment section down below. What do you think about the CIA connection involving the Bates letters? And it's also important to remember, in 2021, perhaps the biggest piece of Zodiac news that year was that the Riverside PD released a statement saying that the Bates had to die letters were a hoax, that they were a prank, that somebody had confessed to fabricating those in 2016, saying that he was a troubled teenager, he did it as a sick joke, and he wanted to come clean. I mean, 50 years later, just under 50 years actually. I was wondering if he was dealing with some type of statute of limitations on the crime. I mean, because that would be a crime that would definitely be obstruction of justice and maybe some other illegal activities, but he said that he was responsible for it and that he was not the real killer and he was not the Zodiac. I am not someone who doubts the authorities, and I'm also not someone who is always thinking that law enforcement is lying to me. Sometimes they do, but until I have a reason to suspect that they are, I go along with stuff like that. If they say that the letters are a hoax, I will support them on that. But a lot of people are in disagreement with me. One of them appears to be James Simpson, who believes that there is this type of encoded message dealing with some type of Hebrew group. But also, I'm the host of the Zodiac Killer Channel's Interview with the Experts series, and I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people about the Bates Had to Die letters. Richard Grinnell of ZodiacCiphers.com gave a lot of explanations about why he believes that the same person wrote the Riverside Confession, the Desktop Poem, and the Bates Had to Die letters. Mark Hewitt as well, author of Hunted, Profiled, and Exposed, and gave some very big reasons why he thinks that the Bates Had to Die letters were not from the prankster, and I would invite you to listen to those interviews over on the Zodiac Killer channel. But to go back to the theories put forward by James Simpson, he's going to look at a very particular suspect whom he believes, indeed, was the Lake Beria Savoyer, the man seen looking at the three girls on September 27th of 1969, and that is Michael Aquino, someone who is not unheard of in the Zodiac world. But what he says is, Michael Aquino was busy during these periods setting up the Temple of Set and the Church of Satan, as well as creating the Manson I and Manson II Son of Sam cults. This group was expanded with the Finders, the Process Church, the Light, the Children of the Fold, and even the NXIVM. You find these terms are related to the ciphers of the original Zodiac letters, each with their own personal signature from Aquino. As a psychological warfare specialist, he was keen to have used the ciphers and his military background with the CIA in Laos under the Phoenix Project to create a sort of quote-unquote little list that mirrored the same technological profiling used then, having access to massive computing centers. They were able to take the names of people and gather other information that would be used to create a profile, and when they planned to target someone, their name was played out in the My Name Is cipher, My Name Is blank, and as we said at the beginning, this allowed them to use the ciphertext as a form filler, adding the name of a person, and you can see that they are playing their own agents as a stool pigeon in case they were caught. Okay, but I want to be clear about something as well. I've talked about the Zodiac Killer CIA connection for some time. I mean, I have a handful of episodes about it, and this is one point that I really felt was neglected in some of the other theories, and that is, what could be the meaning of the ciphers? Like, if it's all about getting the ciphers printed in the paper, or just even getting them discussed in casual conversation, or getting the Bates letters publicized or discussed in casual conversation, could they not have an additional meaning that could only be understood by the CIA operatives? And I think you heard about how the Bates Had to Die letters would be that it says Pade Shad for Pi, and then there's going to be a Morse transmission. But I think that definitely ties right into the idea that the CIA is working with a bunch of underground operations and that they are behind some very sketchy groups that are more or less operating in the shadows, what I like to call the shadow network of cult-like activity, that these groups are sponsored by the CIA as a way to change modern culture, the concept of if you control how people think, you can control everything. Now, I did notice that James Simpson wrote out Manson number 1 and Manson number 2. I believe Manson 1 is just Charles Manson, right? But Manson number 2 is Bill Menser, if I'm not mistaken. And Bill Menser goes on to become a Zodiac Killer suspect himself. I have an episode about him if anybody would like to hear. But I did say we were going to come back to Senator Bernie Sanders, because to give credit to James once again, I think that he is one of the first people who has ever presented a solid case on how there could be some type of Bernie Sanders Zodiac Killer connection, and it just stems from the fact that Bernie Sanders was a CIA operative, that he is involved with all of these things. And the same thing that's going on now, trying to control the way people think, affecting modern culture. And I'll continue with the post from James right here. This is one of his emails. It appears that Sanders was killing a part of the continuation of the previous historical killings, like Jack the Ripper and the Dahlia and the Lipstick murders, both attributed to members of these religious factions. Aquino came along later when the two countries' intelligence agencies decided that they wanted to concoct this affair and plotted to take out John F. Kennedy to plant their choice in the White House. After the assassination, they needed to find a person that fit the image of their intended character to use as a sort of illusion behind the killings of a single person. The peek through the pines card waves their dirty laundry in the wind when inverted, excuse me. As you can see, there is info here that could not really be known from the basic general stories of a lone gunman killer that would be reading about the craft in the images of the card. Now, I want to highlight his solution to the Pines card, because recently I was talking about the case breakers, the people who brought Gary Francis Post forward as the Zodiac, and they said that the cards actually have some very intricate meanings. The Halloween card, the Peek Through the Pines card, and even the 13 Hole Punch card. And I personally think that the case breakers solutions are a little bit too intricate, they're too complicated. But when you turn up the Pines card upside down in James Simpson's theory, it says, "I'm the CIA in your nose, around in the snow, in the bush." And that's just the more like a taunt. I think that is someone who is bragging and taking credit for this. I mean, I think that at this point, though, we do have to give a certain amount of pushback. And Bernie Sanders, though, has connections to California. He's definitely been a career politician. But overall, I do have to play the plausible deniability card about how Bernie could have had any type of involvement with not only the Zodiac murders, but any murder. And I think that there's a lot of wheel spinning and speculation and some things that are a little bit unsubstantiated, because even though I talk about the Zodiac Killer CIA connection, it doesn't mean that I am a genuine believer in this theory, or even in the theory that there are all of these movements that are involved, such as the Process Church, that they are directly orchestrated by the CIA. I mean, I can understand why people think that, and sometimes they have very, very outrageous and exaggerated descriptions of this, just to say something simple, that the CIA is up to no good. I definitely believe that. But these specific pieces put in place, that Manson, the son of Sam, and the Zodiac Killer are all CIA operations that have been created to control humanity, because they're all part of not only this desire to control people, but also there is this type of secret guarded religion that is only present with the global elites. And they need justifications for their destructive behaviors. They need justifications for the wars. They need justifications for doing chemical experiments on people, clinical trials, selling pharmaceuticals that are going to destroy people's brain cells. They need some type of justification for that, so they turn to something that allows them to have these types of practices and encourages them to do so. And then the CIA is the private arm of the global elites, and then, well, they don't want to destroy humanity with a nuclear bomb or something. No, they want to destroy humanity in a way that is profitable for them and allows them to maintain power. So they send out operatives into these vulnerable communities, and then maybe the operative can even be behind the creation of something such as the Process Church, or something such as Scientology, so says some people. Or how about something such as the Manson family, getting straight to it, and that they want to use the publicity around these specific crimes to make people think in a certain way. Because when I've talked about the Zodiac CIA connection in the past, a lot of it relates to the Zodiac Manson connection, and they think that, well, the CIA just wanted to destroy the hippie movement, and that's why Charles Manson was turned into such a famed criminal, that the whole thing, the Sharon Tate murders, the LaBianca murders, that was all just a way to bring Charles Manson into the forefront, and to show people that the hippie lifestyle and sex, drugs, and rock and roll will turn you into a murderer, because the hippies were opposed to not only the Vietnam War, but also to the American political establishment. And I think that James Simpson's material is definitely going in a different direction. He's saying it's way more precise than that, that you have people who are setting up these crimes because there's almost something beyond affecting modern culture. They want to continue a centuries-old tradition of ritual killings. I mean, you heard that line in there about how this is going back to Jack the Ripper, and it was the same thing at that time. I'm playing the skeptical card, but what do you guys think? And you can weigh in the comments section down below, and you can talk about anything that was covered in this episode. Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer. How about Gareth, Penn, and Michael O'Hare, as well as the murder of Joan Webster? Or if you want to weigh in on the solution to the Bates had to die letters, I would put that in the category of no matter what. I think that is a rather incredible solution about Bate Shad Tufi, that it's actually some type of Hebrew message. But I do want to be clear, though, that if there are people out there who do think that there's just this absolute CIA-Israeli connection, if you ever want to spend some time, like a large portion of your life, listening to things about that, I invite you to check out the work of Michael Collins Piper, who's all about pro-Mossad elements in the CIA, as well as pro-Jewish organized crime in the CIA. And I did some responses to the Michael Collins Piper episodes on this channel when I was talking about the Kennedy assassination and lots of things here on Black Box Online Radio. One more time, I invite you to subscribe, and you can go through all of the older podcast recordings. And sometimes I talk about some theories that are a little bit more outrageous than others. But the fact of the matter is I try to give almost everyone a chance, and that was the focus of this episode. I am definitely not convinced that Bernie Sanders has ever been involved in any murder, but what do you think? And I'm also not convinced that the Bates had to die letters were authentic, or that the Lake Berryessa voyeur had any role in the Zodiac killings at all. But if you would like to challenge me on that, you can put your ideas in the comment section down below. Feel free to visit the page for BuyMeACoffee.com for BlackBoxNet88, and you can also write the show the way James Simpson did at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNet88 on Instagram, and I will see you over there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.